Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Kind of Podcast, where we talk about all things Ukraine based on the fact, the history, and all the other stuff that you will not find anywhere else, especially the news. Today, we're going back to our roots, and we are digging into the biography of one of the littlest big men in the history. I don't know. Probably since Napoleon have I not seen a leader that is so mighty and yet so small. The man, the hero, Wide Zelensky himself. So my understanding is that we've got the split up in three parts. I'll be covering his early life and his kind of ascent to political, what do you want to call it, fame, for lack of a better word. At which point Artem's going to take the torch into early presidency, and then Steven's going to help us wrap it up with everything that's happened since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. How are you guys doing today? Good. Again, sorry for delaying the stream here. I'm thankful for your patience when my schedule is a little silly. So, commentary and stuff like that, welcome. I'm going to try to talk about Zelensky's life in the context of forming him kind of as a personality to the best extent that I can. He was born in 78, Kryvyi, which is a hard one for people to pronounce, but it's basically in the Zaporizhia region right now, which is heavily, under attack by the Russians all the time. To a very Jewish family. He himself is also very Jewish, and he was actually spent a few years in Mongolia because his father was doing engineering in Mongolia, and came back. Obviously, the expectation was, because, my understanding is that you have a short list of things you're allowed to be in certain families, and this one would definitely apply. So he actually wanted to go to Israel to study, and his dad shut that down. So he went instead to Kryvyi, and he got a law degree that he went to Kiev, and he got a law degree that he never used outside of a 2-month internship. In terms of his childhood, other significant things is he, again, has come from a very Jewish family. His grandfather and all of the grandfather's brothers were killed by the Nazis in the Holocaust. So I think we went far enough so that the first 30 seconds of YouTube is not going to pick that up. And early on, at the age of 17, even as young as 17, he gets himself involved in, and Artem, I'm going to need your help for this. So there was this Soviet comedy show that itself has its own history. But it is on Wikipedia in English. It's called KVN, which is a Russian abbreviation. And I don't have a sense of the structure. My understanding is that there's like local level teams get together and compete, and then they can get up to a major league where they get together and compete. And the whole premise of the show is that, there's different events, and you and your buds have to get together and perform live, I don't know if it's improv or I don't know if it's prepared comedy, but Artem, is it just like a Moscow-centric thing or what? KVN.
It was Moscow-centric thing. And I don't know, I have no spoilers here, but Zelensky literally killed the Ukrainian direction of Moscow expansion to Ukraine with his show. Because we had the Premier League, the High League, and we as far as I understand, the Ukrainian league of this comedy outfit didn't happen because of Zelensky and his show, because that was impossible to compete for Russians with that.
That is my understanding as well. So basically, 1995, Soundgarden, I think, this is the height of grunge, right after the fall of the Soviet Union. Eddie Vedder somewhere screaming into a microphone about, I think Black came before that. I think Black's the 92 album. But anyway, point is, Zelensky's out and 17 years old, and he's trying to be funny. So he joins a local team out of the Zaporizhia Oblast called the Zaporizhia Kryvyi Transit Group. And that's the whole shtick, is that they're trying to join this KVN show as a local team. And 2 years later, this whole Zaporizhia Kryvyi Transit blows up into the major league of KVN, which is, as I understand it, hosted in Moscow. So
only Moscow.
Yes. So they went to Moscow. They took everyone's lunch because KVN was, I guess, a giant gathering of people who want to be funny from all of the post-Soviet states. Because at this point in time, 1995, 1996, no one had seen, because Chechnya hadn't really happened on the global stage yet. So I'm assuming Belarus, I'm assuming Ukraine, I'm assuming all those sorts of, maybe even Poland and other post-Soviet states as well. I'm not sure, but the point is, Ukraine comes to Moscow, wins all the prizes there are to win at that point in 1997. Zelensky looks at his buds, this 19-year-old kid, and he says, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to call it Quartal 95. And that's what we're going to do. So again, we have now reached the slide, I guess. Is that AI generated Ukrainian? Can we go back? Because it's awesome.
Yeah, it's AI generated.
It added an extra E at the end of Stan, which it looks weirdly like halfway between Polish. But so yes, he at the age of 19 has already had this insane success to the point where he's starting to make people angry, which is always a good thing when you're doing something successfully for the right reasons. So what happens at that point is 1998, we have the Quartal 95, which is Zelensky's comedy troupe, basically. They are performing in the major league of KVN. They are performing in the highest Ukrainian league of KVN, and they're touring around all over the place. They're often in Moscow just because of the very Moscow-centric nature of this comedy show, which is, again, it's probably a relic of the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union itself is extremely Moscow-centric. We can probably skip the next slide. Super duper. Oh, no, we can't go back. We're not there yet. We need to get to 2015 for that. Okay. So, early 2000s. They're still screwing around in Moscow. And what we see is that they start making the Russians mad. So Zelensky gets a job offer from Russian KVN. They say, just ditch everybody, and you're going to be an author/writer for us, Russian KVN. And Zelensky told them to pound sand. And at that point in time, there was apparently this Russian KVN producer decided to use an anti-Semitic slur against Zelensky on stage. So Zelensky categorically decides to tell them to go pound sand. And he brings kind of a lot more of his focus back into Ukraine as of this point. I want to say 2003, because as of 2003, Zelensky now gets Quartal 95 onto the big Ukrainian TV channel 1+1. Almost like a core channel in Ukraine. It's like our, I'm not saying political bias here, but it's a household name, right? So Americans know MSNBC, Americans know Fox, Americans know this. 1+1 in Ukraine is a very similar thing. So this is a big comedy shtick for them. This continues on. 2005, he moves to another TV channel called Inter, which is another household name that will become important later. And broadly speaking, and I wanted to add this, I'll probably add this in post, but around 2008, he starts being in feature-length films. So he's doing a lot of stuff in Ukrainian, the Ukrainian space. A lot of it is in Russian language, though he himself is from Kryvyi Rih. They are predominantly Russian-speaking down in there because that's right in the border of, the effects of the Holodomor and stuff like that. So he also, just fun fact about Zelensky, was the voice of Paddington Bear in the Ukrainian dub, as well as the Red Bird from Angry Birds. So he's cutting his teeth all over the place in the entertainment industry, being very established, to the point where we reach now 2010. So what is he? Born around 1978. So he's 32 around this point, early 30s. 2010, he becomes a member of the board or just kind of a general creative producer type on Inter, this Ukrainian television channel. Artem, I'm going to need you to jump in this one too. I found out that apparently at this time, right, hyper famous comedy star, now in movies, has, gained a reputation and stayed afloat for over 10 years after not working with Russia very intentionally. At this point in time, 2010 to 2012, Yanukovych himself, President Yanukovych, the traitorous ex-president of Ukraine, who fled to Russia during the Euromaidan with vans full of stolen art. Yanukovych goes to Zelensky and says, "I will give you $100 million to give me control of the program." Zelensky tells him to pound sand again. So we have now twice, right? So I don't know, again, I'm not a creative type necessarily in that way, but we've seen multiple times now at this point where some big influential person in the establishment, initially a cultural establishment, now the political establishment, the literal president of his country came and tried to buy him out to have political control over his programming, because as the slide reasonably says, Quartal 95 is known for not pulling punches politically. So they do a lot of political satire. They make fun of people. And so up to around 2012, Yanukovych offers him again $100 million in US dollars. Zelensky says no. So now we're getting to 2014. 2014, the Euromaidan happens. We should have a separate thing about the Euromaidan, but a brief summary of the Euromaidan. The Euromaidan was a student protest that exploded into a national protest because Yanukovych, the corrupt, traitorous ex-president of Ukraine, 180'd on a bunch of political propositions where he promised everybody that the Ukraine was going to be more EU forward. They'd be doing trade with the EU. They'd be developing political relationships, diplomatic relationships with the EU, right? So talking about EU integration. And basically Putin told him no, and then he 180'd and tried to manifest that in Ukraine's domestic policy. People came out and protested. It was not a civil war. I don't know how many people gathered. Ultimately, Artem, you have better numbers on that.
Well, it's difficult to estimate. So, like, usually we believe that it's more than 1 million people gathered at the peak of protests.
Yeah. And Kiev's a city of how many?
Like it depends how we count. So officially it's like 2.6 or something, but with big Kiev, right? The metropolis of the metropolis might be 6, might be 8 million. Like it depends on the year. I believe so.
Yeah.
Something like that. So 1 million is totally possible.
Yeah, and I mean, 1 million is an insane amount of people. That's the first thing. People don't, I think, have the ability to visualize or imagine 1 million people anywhere doing anything. That's the first thing. Second thing is that there were mini Maidans throughout Ukraine, right? So Kiev was not the only Maidan. Many cities, they had their own protests that were more localized in support of pro-European integration. At some point in time, Yanukovych tried the whole iron fist tactics of bringing in Russian titushki, who are people that intentionally aggravate peaceful protests and start throwing bricks at cops and stuff like that and fighting fights, so that then you can, at that point, the government can say, we have violent protesters, they're anti-democratic and all that shit. That didn't work. Eventually, that escalated into the Berkut and other pro-Russian type police forces coming in and shooting civilians. Which is where you get the Heavenly 100, which are the people that died on the Maidan because they were shot to death, again, peacefully protesting. And that's when things got nasty, right? Because the Ukrainians understood that this was much bigger than a student protest was initially going to be. Yanukovych fled the country, so there was no military force that forced Yanukovych to flee the country, right? There was no NATO people, there was no CIA-backed coup that were in with, special agent Navy SEALs, like in Yanukovych's estate, because he had an estate. He just understood that he was no longer politically viable. And because he had killed hundreds of his own people, he up and left with a bunch of stolen art. And that's 2014, right? Now, Crimea was taken in a very probably long-planned FSB operation. The Wagner Russian state-backed groups were then deployed immediately to the eastern oblast, where you see these wars, mini-conflicts starting in Luhansk and Donetsk, where people, again, Wagner is a PMC that was backed by the Russian government, even though the Russian government lied about it. They go into the eastern oblast. They set up these independent republics. Russia's doing everything they can to sell this as a civil war. It is not a civil war. And at this point, in 2014, Zelensky gets everything out of Russia over the course of that year. Quartal Moscow is shut down. Quartal 95 had an office in Moscow. That's shut down. Business ties are cut. This hamstrings their revenue. So there are reports that when everything was up and running in the entire former Soviet space, Quartal 95 was doing, I think, what's the number? 200,000 American dollars revenue per hour of programming. And that got cut down to like 30,000. So a 6x loss by them moving out of Russia. But they did it because it's for the right reasons. They started doing tours in the Ukrainian front. They started performing for soldiers. They donated a few million hryvnia to the Ukrainian army. And in 2014, that leads to Russian politicians and Russian cultural figures saying that, we have to ban Quartal 95 in Russia. And I don't know if they did that, but a lot of stuff gets banned in Russia anyways. So, the internet is in a lot of ways banned in Russia. And before we get to the next slide, because we're going to get into the Sluga Naroda, the Sluga Narodu part, I guess we can go to the next slide. It is important to note that Zelensky always in this was trying to come across as a voice of, integrating Russian-speaking Ukrainians and Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians. He is initially against banning Russian artists in Ukraine. He had existing relationships way back with obviously the Russian cultural scene, just through, a decade or two of working in it. He even had a movie with some random Russian dude in it that he filmed in like 2010, like a sequel, like Love in the Big City 2, I think, that had a Russian actor that then got blacklisted. Therefore, Zelensky's film got blacklisted, even before he was a president. So there was a degree where Zelensky looks at what's going on and says, like, this is enough, with 2014 where he pulls all the business out. But he is also a character that is coming in on the Sluga Narodu at this point, which is the Servant of the People TV series. And that's the whole shtick, right? Is that he's a teacher. The teacher's really mad at corruption through some, I don't even remember, do you guys remember the circumstance where he becomes the president in the TV show?
If I'm not mistaken, from the ads I saw, because I have never seen the show, it was like crowdfunding campaign launched by the students, because you need to make you need to pay a fee to the government to run the campaign, and after that, somehow he got elected.
Yeah. So that starts happening in 2015, and it eventually does become the platform for the real life political party, which is kind of where we start getting into the intrigue of Zelensky. So that's basically all I got. Early life. Very established comedian, very established very successful cultural performer in Ukraine, doing his best to integrate and talk and bring people together. That's his whole shtick. We'll see that probably repeat throughout his political career in several ways. But very strict understanding of what Moscow and Russia are. So I can transition to somebody else at this point.
So guys, do you know to whom belong the words servant of the people?
Kolomoisky?
No, it's Stalin. It's Joseph Stalin.
Did not know that.
And I don't know if it was a joke, like a prank, or anything else. Was it intended, or just a simple message for people to understand and believe? So I would like to mention a couple of things before we go to his life and politics of his. So I don't know when the moment when it happened that in his head or somebody else's head that he must run for the chair for the presidency, because considering their content that they produced with the Quartal, or the content they produced doing the movie production. So that has never been in their agenda. So here we can only speculate how it happens, and I doubt that we'll ever know why. So but the movement the move was so cool that enormous number of people believed into the project and trusted, because 77%, this is something that rarely any can like achieve.
Yeah. Wasn't he the most popular after Kuchma? Like the most popular, the highest percentage ever after Kuchma, I think. Like 73% with the election itself, which is just...
Probably. Well, that's difficult. You see, like the numbers of you operate like if it's like percentage of something, because with Zelensky it might be like 73%. It's like 10 million or 7 million or 8 million like voters. But with Kuchma it could have been like 15 million. So like despite the same like percentage or close one, the scale of the activity of people like it's quite different, because Yanukovych was winning like in 2004 when he ran for the first time for the chair. That was like 15 or 13 million people, something like that. He got it, and it's like those are big numbers. So for Ukraine, it's like that's a lot. And that was a successful project for sure, because like him losing the production in Russia. And all Russian projects, because of all many movies that were Russian-speaking movies, they were like targeting the all former Soviet Union like space because of the language, of course, and because that was easy, and actually Russian government like backed them with funds. So that was for some people that was the way to go, because that was the business to like.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
Zelensky had like another movie just that I was reading about where because of the Russia-centric nature of the Soviet Union, Russian was the lingua franca of a lot of those countries, which was exacerbated by the fact that Russia obviously tried to suppress the local languages. So people that are Zelensky's age and older get this in this part of the world, which is why in these movies, Zelensky there was, I think, one of his 2018, 2019 films even, there was like a Lithuanian chick or a Latvian that they filmed it in Ukrainian. Initially, they wrote the script in Ukrainian, but then they had to translate part of it into Russian because this Lithuanian person had at least some understanding of Russian so that she could understand what was going on in the script, because, again, Russia injected itself everywhere. So was the norm for everything going on here, right? It's that was just how people communicated, because I don't know how many people speak Lithuanian, but it's not very many. Far more people speak Russian and far more people speak English. But that's
Lithuanian is around 2 million people probably.
Yeah, I mean, so but it's a quarter of Manhattan or less in the world. So.
But now the Baltics don't really speak much Russian at all. I've heard like they've really kind of pushed it out, maybe in some pockets, but not at a national level.
Well, for them, it's the way to survive, because Russian language kills everything around, like literally.
Well, and they have, I think Estonia did it the best, because I think Estonia switched back to Estonian immediately, like in the early 90s. So they did they're the most culturally resilient. But the other fact is too that if Russia had wanted to take those countries, they would roll over. There's just, not saying that they wouldn't fight; they'd fight like hell. But it's Russia has over 1 million KIA, MIA in 3 years in Ukraine, and how many people live in Estonia? Like we can Google how many people live in Estonia.
1.4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Million. Like
do the math. Like, and Estonia loses that war without NATO.
Finland would put up a fight, though.
Oh, the partisan resistance would be insane, but it would come in immense human and infrastructure, other costs. So it's better to just keep the Russian out and put it inside. Sorry for the aside.
Yeah. So like less Russian you have in your country, the bigger GDP you have as well. Somehow it correlates. No, look at this. Like like Ukraine and Moldova, like were like too tolerant towards Russian language. Look at the GDPs that the two countries have.
What is this? I found what I was trying to find. The per capita GDP in Germany based on the state.
Well, the Bavaria wins, I guess.
Probably.
I mean, Eastern Germany is just by far. I'll take this image and I'll put it in the post. But like, you have this nice arcing dark blue across all of Western Germany, and Bavaria is like dark blue because it's the best. And then Eastern Germany is like white gray. So I mean, we're talking half of Bavaria's GDP.
Wow.
Because, well, sorry, speaking German is hard. Sorry.
Yeah, Soviet zone of occupation is very unhealthy for any economy, and it's easy to spot on any map. Yeah, so speaking of presidential campaign and the victory, the presidential campaign was long and probably started way before when that officially declared, because we had already the show, The Servant of the People. We had already New Year, how do you call it?
Address.
Wishes, address on TV, on the on the 1+1 TV channel.
Yes.
And that like it also like had its impact because people talk, because this was something very unusual for more than 30 years of Ukrainian independence. So that had its like a viral effect. And sure.
What was the technical glitch that happened with Zelensky's speech? Did it override Poroshenko's speech, or did it happen like before, or what was it? Because I don't remember.
It was instead. Huh? That was instead just.
It just replaced it.
Yeah, they just replaced it on one channel, only one channel. But you understand, like what happens, like when like you have usually the pattern or the program to go, and like you have like scenario that gonna happen something, and it's not the first time in Ukraine history when it happens, the patterns like that. So when one channel does something that others don't, sure, it's like enormous like number of views. The same happens with the fifth channel in 2004.
Okay.
So popularity of the channel like just skyrocketed because that was the only opposition channel during the Orange Revolution. And the same happened like after this like New Year like events with Zelensky.
We got to take a step back real quick. The Soviet Union was ostensibly an atheistic structure. Therefore, they did everything they could to devalue existing holidays and distract people with new artificial ones. Therefore, a lot of original Christian holidays and other local holidays were moved off by 2 weeks in the calendar, and emphasis was placed on other previously non-existent holidays such as New Year's. That's why throughout the Soviet Union and a lot of the post-Soviet countries, you still see remnants, right? In Ukraine, this is now coming back, right? So in Ukraine, Christmas is now officially the 25th, where it had previously been pushed off 2 weeks to reflect the Russian Orthodox Julian calendar, but so they're having that back. However, New Year's in the Soviet Union was a huge deal. It was like their Christmas. For a lot of people in Ukraine, New Year's still is a really big deal. It is, when people sometimes get gifts. And every year, even if people don't really celebrate New Year's, they celebrate Mykolaichik or something, which is Mykolaichik's the Ukrainian Santa Claus that brings gifts ahead of Christmas. Everybody watches the New Year's address on New Year's Eve at midnight. It's the first thing you see going into the new year. The president goes on TV and he says a bunch of nice things about how it's going to be. It usually starts a few minutes beforehand, and they usually time it so that dramatically at midnight, the president finishes up some speech, and then he wishes you all New Year, and, blessings and all that happy shit. Zelensky announced his campaign on TV and overwrote Poroshenko's speech accidentally.
This is 2018?
Yes. So this people that were watching the TV channel who wanted to see the president wish them a happy new year, they got Zelensky doing the same thing and announcing his presidential candidacy for a race, which I think this is December 31st. I believe the election was April. If I'm not mistaken, 2019. So very last, and then Zelensky's team called it a technical glitch. Context, again, is everything. I didn't know that this was not the first time that trick has been pulled.
Well, it's not like the first time. That the second time probably, if I'm not mistaken, when the views are just exploded for the audience. And like it happened already like in the future, and I'm sure it will happen more with the like coming events, whatever it is, because like country cannot live without election anyway.
Yes.
Because like country may lose it like Western support. So it's not gonna happen. Ukraine has no choice for that, and this is a good thing. So like Ukraine is democracy because it's poor. It cannot afford like anything else, and no one else could like support it because Russia and China probably sided together against Ukraine. So Ukraine has no choice. So this is the good part. So going back to the campaign was short, and probably for the first time in Ukrainian history, that was more a show than competition of ideas and views. Because that was based on emotions and not on Ukraine's future.
He did what? He did not really share, my understanding is he didn't really even share any policy positions, and he was getting attacked for that. Because he was using a lot of YouTube and a lot of like other social media platforms to kind of just speak to people directly and not go through the filter of Ukrainian mainstream media, which is very interesting. Partially because I think Ukrainian mainstream media, like us in the States, is owned by a very small group of people, like all of our main channels are. And secondly, because I think around the late 2018s, that was, I'm trying to remember, when things like Twitter and Instagram, when that generation really started to lean into that, and we started to definitively move away from television-based news as a central medium for receiving information. I think around the time that tilt happened is when he was also leveraging it. So, points to consider.
Right move at the right time. So when people just shifted from traditional TVs to like online media. So that was not like his achievement, but that was the right timing for the messages that was like sent. So that was a cool part, and as I mentioned, that was not about like ideas. And his presidential campaign was more, let's say like politically neutral than super pro-Western oriented. Because again, like as that was already mentioned, he was against any like bans of Russian language content in Ukraine, and by that time, Russian like social media were already banished in Ukraine. Their version of like Facebook, which is Contact, and like Classmates, social media as well, because they were like big channels of Russian impact. I cannot say like propaganda, but that was easy to spread and like impossible to respond because we live in we live in the time of post-truth. Like no matter what's that, it's too late to prove that was a lie because it's already piled under another like layers of data.
Wasn't there one they didn't ban, like Yandex was still like being used with younger people? That's my understanding. And I think it was later banned, is that right?
It was later banned, and like Russian version of Google.
That's right, yeah.
Was dominating in Ukrainian like internet
For a while,
many years.
That's what I thought.
It's not
so like it's not relevant, but even though the traffic and like attention towards Google started turning like little by little, like more and more with time. So like, and Yandex, like the Russian Google project, like probably is the greatest example, and we talked about it like earlier, how Russian imperialist like intention just crashed that business that was successful in Poland, the Netherlands, Turkey, and Russia, and Ukraine, and Belarus, like in many countries. And now the company doesn't exist. It's gone.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's
Wow,
what I was trying
okay.
to say when I said it's not relevant anymore, because not like your point was irrelevant, but to the point where this was a completely universal thing.
Sure.
People didn't Google stuff; they Yandexed stuff.
Oh, wow.
I remember that even like early Peace Corps when I got it, people were still referencing it, and now it's gone. Now people just say Google or
Oh, is that right? Is that true in Russia as well?
probably.
Yeah. The project doesn't
it's-
exist. The founder moved to Israel, or maybe already to California. I don't know.
Wow.
And that's not many things are mentioned on the founder, like Wikipedia page, that he was doing business in Moscow for many decades, not just years, decades.
Sure.
But as soon as he was able to pull all his money out of Russia,
Yeah.
he started speaking finally like against the war, because like no one likes that.
Sure.
But people choosing their personal security over truth.
Yeah. Well, I believe
And like, yeah, that's what happens. So again, about the presidential campaign, that was fast, that was vivid, and very unusual. With the last actually communication with audience possible. So that was no debates. Debates will just show, no debates about the values, so like what we do with our debt economy, like joining NATO or the EU, like nothing of that was like an agenda.
Dude, I saw that debate. It was a circus.
Yeah, it was like that was a Coliseum, like that was like ancient Rome, like show.
Yes.
Like
That's a good way
literally.
to describe it.
So-
It was like just them being gladiators and trying to
Yes.
upstand each other
Yes.
morally. And like, it was just so bizarre.
Wow.
Yes.
I remember watching.
Yeah, and that was for Zelensky. That was already based on his show, because the preparation for the debate was already like placed into the heads of Ukrainians, and it's very difficult to compete with something serious when people consume like fun and entertainment in way bigger portions than the real politics. Because real politics is just like geology. It's like time and pressure.
Well, it's to your point, Artem, he's incumbent at that point, so he has a disadvantage coming in. To the second point, that Poroshenko, I think, did not respect Zelensky as like an opponent politically, and therefore he did not respect him as an opponent in the debate, because Zelensky was just like this kind of vacuous, like populistic sort of, we need to solve corruption, we need to be more transparent, we need to, pay our taxes and all that other kind of like happy shit. But Zelensky, whipped, like, just outmaneuvered him 6 ways to Sunday in that debate. Everything Poroshenko said, Poroshenko started attacking Zelensky for him not having political experience. Zelensky said, you know what? I voted for you. We all voted for you. But we didn't vote for this. And just every single thing Poroshenko said, Zelensky had an answer to it. And I don't know if that's because he's a really good improv comic, or if it's because he just has like tremendous stage presence and tremendous charisma. But Poroshenko lost that debate, if you want to call it a debate, at the Olympic Stadium. But it was just such a strange, bizarre display of a really old politician that was trying his hard to be relevant in a new world that was evolving faster than he was, and the young guy that's obviously going to replace him, but nobody really knows what he thinks about anything. So, very odd.
Sure. Well, technically, that debate was one of the let's say competition from the Russian KVN like outfit, literally. When it's emotional, so no one cares about arguments, and the worst or the best part of it, you cannot check it. There is no fact checking. So it's all emotional and like driven by the timing. And it doesn't matter. Like technically, it did matter what people talk about, but in terms of the outcome, that was total disaster for the real politics, because no one likes when it's impossible to debate. So the debate just died that day.
Well, what happened here? What happened in America in 2016? I mean, come on. Trump just took over the
Yes, exactly. That was very close. Trump did very close things because Trump never debated with his opponents. He never talked about his agenda. He never talked about what he wants to achieve. He was just sending like very short messages, like like tweet messages, emotional very one. Like, I will finish like Ukrainian war in Ukraine in like 24 hours or in an hour or like whatever he believed in. And I believe that he honestly believed in what he was saying.
Public. Yeah. So Zelensky took a similar approach. Did not call Poroshenko's wife a dog face, but Poroshenko, I think, has more dignity than Ted Cruz ever will. So he would probably not actually take that comment.
Lion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and after the prominent win, the real politics starts. So Zelensky, he honestly believed that he can agree with Putin about the war,
Yes.
about he and I'm not sure about that. But I so far believe that he was ready even to sacrifice NATO and make and slow down the European integration of Ukraine. But there was one small problem. He was elected president, and he was not a duke or king or something. He didn't have that power. After he got elected. So and the first years of his presidency, I couldn't tell they were successful. He was learning a lot because he had previously he had no experience. The Ukrainian economy started not feeling that well. I don't know why, because maybe it's another topic for how Ukrainians switch with every new government, because our institutions are weak and depend somehow on each new government. So the economy started declining first 2 years.
A telling data point is that after 2 years, Zelensky's, who got a 73% vote to win the election, his popularity rating dropped to 24%.
Wow.
And that is a historic high for Ukrainian presidents in the same timeline.
Wow.
So he was still, the country just dropping off faith completely. Just, no trust, and he still, despite all of that, had some of the highest numbers ever recorded, second only to Kuchma again.
Wow.
So,
yeah, but the trust and the popularity drops very often in all countries after the election, because people believe in what they want to believe, because no one likes reality. What's really going on, and the worst part of it, it's not the economy does not that great as we expected to be or we wanted it to be. The worst part was that Ukraine failed the preparation for big invasion, for full-scale invasion. So this was the worst part.
To what extent? That's an interesting one. We're jumping to 2022 already.
Should we go to the next slide then?
I mean,
well, we can talk about the.
Before we do that, I have one thing I need to mention. I don't know about
you. Sure.
Okay. One thing that the West forgets and American media outlets do not talk about anymore is the fact that Zelensky, as Artem very correctly said, very much believed that there was negotiating to be done with Russia still. He believes this to a point where Ukrainians stopped liking him, and he still believed it. He initiated the Normandy format and the Minsk Accords, not once, but twice, which is a very straightforward thing. And this is, again, we get into a game of understanding Russia, right? Where Zelensky's saying, if you guys leave the country, we will think about allowing elections in the breakaway regions, which sounds insane, because it is kind of insane, until you realize the logic of the Russian mind, which is Putin would never pull out his military presence from the occupied regions, because their independence is not the agenda. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that this European format where Russia and Ukraine get together to talk about, Minsk 1, Minsk 2, and the ceasefire and all that happy shit, because the lines were pretty well drawn at that point. They hadn't really moved since 2016. Failed. It failed miserably. Russia was still in the OSCE, which is a monitoring body that monitored the contact point, and there were Russian citizens staffing that European mission, which is outrageous inherently. Russia violated the ceasefire basically every single day. So I did a good analysis of a report back in the day, like LinkedIn fucking post or something like that. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of violations a year, recorded violations. These are only the ones that were recorded, right? Of the Russians shooting across the line, using weapon systems they're not supposed to use, while they're, so again, the overarching thing is here. Zelensky tried really hard to negotiate out a solution. He really tried hard to integrate Europe. The Europeans did not really help, and the negotiations broke down. When he did that, when that broke down, Zelensky tried to play chicken. I think he tried to play chicken with the Russians personally by saying, we'll do something crazy. Good for you if this is really your agenda. If you leave the military, if the military leaves, right? And Russia obviously did not do that because Zelensky, I think, called their bluff. Most of 2021, Zelensky spent asking NATO partners for increased security guarantees because everybody knew what was going on in 2021. Just saying, all over the place, just round robin with, where was it at? We also completely skipped over the Zelensky-Trump scandal, which Trump almost got impeached for because, Americans, I don't know, Stephen, how would you describe that very briefly? Trump will dig up dirt Biden and then...
Yeah, I mean, and technically he was impeached. He just wasn't convicted in the Senate. But he was, quoted saying, or recorded, I guess, saying, something along the lines of, and if you have time, I'd like you to look into this. And it was recorded by Alexander Vindman, who at the time was, I believe, a colonel in the military, and who was actually let go. And I've actually met him, but it was really bad, and there was no protection for the whistleblowers, but nothing came of it in terms of getting dirt or whatever. The whole Hunter Biden and laptop scandal, if you all remember that, but it was kind of swept under the rug. Other than the fact there was an impeachment vote, but that was about it in terms of political fallout.
But ahead of the war, and I just found the quote. Point number one, Zelensky apparently disagreed with Joe Biden on how imminent the threat was, because the Ukrainians understood the threat, and Joe Biden didn't understand what stocks he had on that day, because he was trying to also simultaneously quiet panic, mass panic, because the Russians were starting to do information operations and stuff like that. Number two, on the 19th of February, Zelensky warned the Munich Security Conference that the Western nations should abandon their appeasement attitude towards Moscow. This is 3 days before the full-scale invasion. You could quote, Ukraine has been granted security assurances in exchange for giving up the world's third largest nuclear arsenal, full stop. We don't have any firearms, full stop. And there's no, firearms from them is what he means. Firearms from without Ukraine, European and American partners. And there's no security, but we have a right to urge a transformation from an appeasement policy to one that ensures security and peace. If that sounds familiar, it's because the story has not changed since that time, because there is no appeasing Russia. And everybody that knows anything about Russia understands there's no appeasing Russia. So I'll hand it back over.
Yeah, but when Zelensky told that, at the Munich security conference, that was already too late for Europeans or Americans to understand anything, because they should have listened to Putin in 2007 before the summit in Bucharest in 2008. Actually, 2 months prior invasion to Georgia, 8th of August of 2008, the summit, NATO summit in Bucharest. But when we talk about Europeans and back then, so we need to understand that 2008, who was in charge of European politics? So it was Merkel in her chair, that was Sarkozy, and they were not. I cannot call them pro-Russians, but they were quite sympathetic and leaning towards Russian views around about security and European politics. The same happened with the Normandy meetings, because that was Hollande, French president, if I'm not mistaken, and again Merkel. And since then, we already have change of two German governments with different chancellors. That despite that the current one is from the same party as Merkel was, so it has completely different views, completely different outcome, and completely different agenda towards Ukraine and European politics overall. Because the Germans see when the Russians try to kill the CEO or the head of the biggest German military production concern, so that something's going wrong, something's going on, and they need to react somehow to it. And also now, we'll skip the part about the confidence in NATO, in everything. It doesn't matter for now. It's probably a topic for another time. But going back to the presidency, before the big invasion, that was little to do for Zelensky and for Western allies about the situation with war, because no one knew if Ukraine will stand, if Ukraine survives, or what actually aid Ukraine needs. It was all undefined, just total plan. And after few months, when many Ukrainians went voluntarily to fight with sometimes with their hands, so the Western partners finally got their shit together and started help. The politics before the invasion, they were less show, as for example the election. They were more learning curve for Zelensky and his partners inside, in Ukraine.
Yes.
That's a nice picture. Yeah. Oh, look at this. Relations with Russia.
War, yes.
There are always.
All right. Well, I can certainly take over from here. So, Zelensky had been in office 2 years, I think a little bit more than 2 years before we saw kind of the buildup of, tanks and other munitions near the border. I believe kind of to the northeast, I guess the buildup was kind of happening everywhere, but we saw, kind of outside the Sumy Oblast, and I think it was happening in Belarus too, I believe, a sudden buildup that was being described as the biggest since World War II. It's funny, we heard that term a lot, the biggest, the worst, since World War II would keep coming up after the invasion began. And if I recall correctly, there was concern, but not overly concern. I think, the situation was being monitored, but I don't recall Zelensky taking a whole lot of criticism for not doing enough, for not being proactive enough, because when we saw the invasion happen, in a lot of areas it went really poorly for Russia. It was handled pretty well by the Ukrainians, especially kind of in the north. It happens from Belarus and all sides. I think they were saying 3 kind of quarters of Ukraine was invaded at the same time. And this is where his presidency, I think, really got tested, right? The sudden shift from kind of peacetime to wartime leader, instead of just kind of, maintaining domestic policy and international relations, all of a sudden, he's thrust into this role that, is testing of anyone, of any politician, especially someone fairly new, fairly inexperienced to the job. And so we see him kind of get a lot of, recognition internationally. There's the famous quote here, "I need ammunition, not a ride," when he was offered, an exfil from the country, stays and really becomes this symbol of leadership and takes on a kind of international persona that became symbolic with the whole of Ukraine. So what happened too during the time is, Russia was trying to eliminate him, right, and install a pro-Kremlin government, which they thought was something they could do within a matter of days. And it's my understanding that they sent some kind of agents in, I don't know if it's FSB or whatever, to try and actually eliminate him. And Artem and I were talking before the call that his security service did such a good job of identifying and then subsequently neutralizing the threat that was sent in to kill him. That the first couple of days, a couple of weeks, I should say, went terribly wrong in the north part of Ukraine, along with other parts. And I think all Russian forces were expelled by April in the north part. Does that sound right? So, terrible things happened if you look at, Bucha and Irpin and other places. But in terms of the military, response, Ukraine did a really good job. So, he's being tested in a lot of ways, right? Because then there's this, commitment from other countries to help them, help Ukraine with their support. They're getting a lot of kind of weapons, different systems under, Biden, under different EU leaders. So initially there's, I would kind of call, more than just bipartisan, right? Like a big push from Europe and from the US to really kind of arm them. And I think that was instrumental a lot in their initial defense. But granted, a lot of things were homegrown in Ukraine, right? And I think one of the biggest kind of symbolic victories was the sinking of the Moskva, which was done with Ukrainian weapons. I guess, drones kind of distracted it. And then there was a missile that kind of came to rally around. So that in his quote, like the ghost of Kyiv and the Snake Island defiance. So all these kind of initial moments early on really became rallying cries, and there's a lot of support around him. And what else is he managing? So another thing that happened within, I think, a week or so after the invasion is they start formally applying to be an EU member. We see our future more with the EU, and I think things are kind of leaning toward that, but this was really a catalyst that galvanized that movement. So again, a lot of pro-Ukrainian and pro-Zelensky support. For a while, though, he has not left Ukraine. I believe at that point he had been invited by a number of countries, and his first visit was to the U.S. to meet with Biden, actually, and I believe that's when he gave a speech to both houses of Congress and wore his kind of wartime outfit, and later took criticism for not wearing a suit and tie, and was meeting.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah, which he was asked about, and just like I'm a wartime leader. This is what I wear, and this is what I don't have time for the suit and tie, not literally, but figuratively, of course. And so we see this kind of balancing act, I think, where again he is meeting with military personnel, and they're doing a pretty good job into the spring of 2022, a couple of months after, of taking back significant amounts of previously Russian-held territory. In a matter of like weeks, their response is, decisive. And once that happens, right, so now we're late 2025, the line has held remarkably consistent, right? It's really kind of been a war of attrition. Since then, there was kind of that incursion into Kursk, and certain, territory has been, I think, retaken, but there's not been a significant advancement of Russian forces. And the other thing I want to mention is that Zelensky has to manage kind of personalities, right? He is the commander-in-chief of the forces, the armed forces, but, I think there are disagreements with the top commander, who I believe was a general. Do you all remember his name? I don't recall now. He was fired at one point. Yeah. And that drew a lot of criticism, I believe. I think I don't recall the underlying reason as to why he was let go. Some disagreement. I don't know if you all know any more than that. Someone new was installed, and that was minorly controversial, if I recall. But
yes,
that just goes to show that he still has to manage all of these kind of personalities and everything else he's doing at the same time. So,
yeah.
hey, go ahead.
I was. There are so many reasons to critique Zelensky, just like there are reasons to critique any leader.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many moments where just I don't even know what to call it, like a pressure. It's like he had a compression test that he was under as a leader of a country and as an individual, and he passed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even just comparing to 2 presidents ago, Yanukovych, you look at how. I mean, seriously though, like it sounds like a joke to Ukrainians because the Ukrainians understand how much of a joke it is in terms of how different those two people are. But for Americans, it's like unthinkable that a president would, betray the country and flee to Russia or flee to China, and then, after one administration, like 4 or 5 years later, we would have a second president that would survive a crisis like this and just blossom, right? Despite everything, like Stephen was saying, the FSB assassinations were. If you want to do an interesting bit of reading, there were I think 2 or 3 assassination attempts that the FSB actually foiled because the Ukrainian SBU, which is like their CIA, Secret Service, like interior service kind of thing, intel service, got intelligence from Russian FSB defectors about FSB plots, and one even including nuclear weapons. But in terms of his presence on the world stage, in terms of him dealing with the impossibility of European politics and, everything from Trump the first time to Biden the first time to now Trump the second time, I have no idea how you could possibly expect more out of a leader.
Right.
Like who would do this better?
Yeah, I completely agree. And, another thing I want to point out is in terms of criticism, especially international, not from Ukrainians, is the fact that he's perceived as no longer being elected, which, right, so he's elected to a 5-year term in 2019, expires in 2024. Obviously, a full election cannot be held. There are too many people out of the country, too many people, on the front line. So the logistics of setting up an election cannot happen. And so, one of the terms Trump used to describe Zelensky was a dictator, right? He's been there too long. And so, obviously, when it's possible to schedule a next election and all of that, that will happen, and there'll probably be a referendum on his performance so far. But the idea of Ukraine not being a democracy is fictional, right? Under no wartime invasion can a practical, transparent election be held. And Ukraine has been under martial law, right, since the invasion began. So, there have been things like checkpoints and, looking at papers of I believe men aged 18 to 60 and, a draft and registration and all of that. And while those are perhaps easy to look at criticisms from the outside, they need to mobilize as many able-bodied people as possible. So I don't think those are shortcomings on the performance or the policies of Zelensky, because you really need to look at like a full-blown wartime economy, which I think most people in the West don't fully appreciate. So
it's like Artem said, Zelensky's not a king. Ukraine is not a parliamentary republic, or rather, Ukraine is a parliamentary republic, sorry, which means the parliament sits with at least as much as or more power than the president. So we currently have a president and an administration that is just doing the whole Project 2025 thing and taking all the guardrails off. They're taking all the safeties off the rocket ship, which for us is a problem. But Zelensky does not have that power. even though his political party was very popular still. I think the best response, Stephen, to your whole thing with the elections is that the leader, what Ukrainian and the Americans have in common is that people that actually love their country take an oath to protect the Constitution. The Constitution of Ukraine forbids elections under martial law.
Mm-hmm.
Martial law is the only law that makes sense when you have people dying, civilians, every single day. This was a point that Charlie Kirk and a lot of the other people love to bring up. That Zelensky's this unelected, dictator that is artificially dragging out the war instead of just capitulating. And when the response is, okay, number one, like you said, Stephen, how do you conduct elections in the interior, which require mass gatherings of people at election offices, which during wartime is a terrible idea because oftentimes when you get a mass of people in the right place, an Iskander missile or a Dagger missile materializes on that location about 5 to 10 minutes later. How do you get votes from the military folks without gathering them? How do you get votes from Ukrainians in occupied territories? Because their voices are important and their lives are important and they matter, even though they are under Russian occupation in these 20% of 20-ish% of Ukraine that is still.
Including Crimea with that, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it would include the snap election, but whenever the snap election happens after the war is over, internationally speaking, in terms of law and everything else, Crimea is Ukrainian. The fact that it's occupied does not make it not Ukrainian.
Correct.
So the issue would be how they get all the Russians that have been imported into these occupied areas, because that's largely what's going on, right? Is that they're taking Ukrainians, the Ukrainian children, and like spiriting them away to shithole areas of Russia, and then importing a bunch of Russians there who don't have principles. But there is just I don't know even where you, especially as an international person, like Ukrainians, okay, you could start to nitpick about the domestic politics and like, oh well, he chose person A when he should have chosen person B. Like Artem, sure, you could do a whole podcast episode on that by itself. But for foreigners, like, shut the hell up. There's really nothing that you have to say of any value.
Right.
That holds water. Just the argument doesn't hold water. It doesn't. Like, oh, his wife is buying, 100,000 euro shopping spree in Paris. Like, no, she's not. There's no evidence that ever happened.
I mean, I have a small question about the definition of dictatorship. So I understand that someone can call Zelensky a dictator. Okay, like just imagine that it is possible, like on the green earth. The question is how you can define a dictatorship that happened in Ukraine and being fine with everything that is going on in other countries. In Russia, Putin in his chair, for example, sits since 1999. Why it is not dictatorship in China, for example? How do you skip the very weird politically like established regime in Hungary, when Hungarian prime minister elected God knows how many times, and his like pocket pitbull goes regularly to Moscow and agree with everything Moscow says.
And Belarus too.
So, like, Belarus is a puppet regime. I hope not a state.
Well,
yet.
I would say an unelected leader. I mean, it's a scam. They don't do elections there, right? You can't be in power since 1995.
That's the point of elections. You don't do them in countries like that. So like, the question is how it can be, like, if it's possible, if dictatorship is possible in Ukraine right now during full scale invasion, and there is a definition for that, how the definition can exclude like countries like Russia, Belarus, etc. So, but this is the question.
Constitution. Like, this is the whole thing. It doesn't. Zelensky's a dictator. The Constitution says he's allowed to be there. You know how Zelensky cannot be a dictator? Russia can fuck off, and then Ukraine will undo martial law, and there'll be a snap election, and then there'll be an elected leader. Oh, Zelensky's corrupt. Zelensky's if he's corrupt, then why can't he be bought by Putin?
That's a good point.
Why can't he be bought? Like, this is insane money that we're talking about.
Oh yeah.
Putin has China backing now, right?
Yeah.
If Zelensky could be bought, he would have been bought. We just demonstrated that over the course of the slideshow. He tried to be bought when he was an up-and-coming comedian by KBN Russia, and he told them to pound sand. He tried to be bought, like Yanukovych tried to buy him. He told Yanukovych to pound sand. He obviously cannot be bought because, right? Okay, well, Zelensky's a Nazi. Zelensky's a Jew. He is the Jewiest Jew to have ever Jewed since the Jews got holocausted out of Ukraine. He was so Jewish, he wanted to move to Israel, and his dad said, no, your grades weren't good enough. It's like, well, everybody else is a neo-Nazi. It's like, well, okay, the president and the prime minister were both Jews at the same time when Zelensky got elected.
Was that Grossman?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's the only country in the world other than Israel to have two Jewish heads of state at the same time.
That's pretty funny.
What else are they even saying about, like, what's the other arguments against Zelensky?
So, well, I just want to bring up a really quick one, which is a ridiculous argument. I think Kirk went to like Oxford or something and was debating students, and someone brought up this really interesting point. He said, Israel and Palestine, or kind of Hamas, done something wrong. Russia, Ukraine, one side has done something wrong, one side has not. And Kirk's response is kind of like, well, I don't really agree. Like, Ukraine's very corrupt. We're giving a lot of money there, and it just kind of disappears. And that was an interesting response because he couldn't defend the point that Ukraine has not done anything wrong. And maybe if there were to be criticism of corruption, that's a whole different argument. And number one, I wouldn't agree with that, but it was just an interesting, for someone who kind of made a name or a income right out of debating. There's just no argument to be had that Ukraine had done anything wrong or provocative or to start this, right? Yeah. So that's Ukraine as a country, but again, under Zelensky's leadership the whole time, I just don't see there's, enough valid international criticism. I don't know what the points are, other than, the one that kind of keeps coming up is like, he's not elected anymore, right? Which is untrue. So I'm trying to think other common criticisms.
Azov. So we need
right.
Azov, because Azov is very poorly understood.
You mean the Azov battalion, to clarify?
Azov is now huge. Azov has so evolved in so many different ways now, away from like the worst parts of what it was initially associated with to a certain degree. It's it's a big complex structure now that is it is associated with the military, but it's not. Okay, we need to do a whole episode on Azov at some point. But when you even look at the people that really just rail home the like Ukrainian neo-Nazi thing, again, Zelensky's a Jew. It would be a little hypocritical of a Nazi to swear to protect the, like, even if they're ultra nationalists and they're like, oh, well, we only care about the Constitution, blah blah blah. Like,
right.
Azov is subservient to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Therefore, it must execute the commands and the desires of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Zelensky is the commander-in-chief of Ukraine. Therefore, falls under a Jew. That's the first point. Second point is, when people go on the neo-Nazi thing, I'm like, let's talk about the boat parade in Florida. Let's talk about the Proud Boys. Let's talk about Michigan. Let's talk about what was that?
About Virginia. Virginia. Well, I mean, it was a while ago, but you know what I'm talking about.
So let's talk about all that, right? When all the far right parties in Ukraine got together and they tried to form a big coalition of like 5 or 6 of them, they got less than 2% of the popular vote. Ukrainians don't give a shit about this stuff. It is a nothing circumstance. It's like saying there's neo-Nazis, like saying there's corruption. It's like saying that there's things that are everywhere, things that are. It's not a significant statement. And it also just completely whitewashes, like Artem was saying, it whitewashes the obvious moral evil of everything that Russia is doing and everything that Russia has been. Because even if Ukraine is corrupt, and there is corruption in Ukraine, there's corruption in every country, does that mean Ukraine deserves what's happening to it right now?
Exactly.
Does that justify the suffering? And
absolutely not.
And the answer is absolutely not. If you are not a prick.
Right. Yeah.
So, with obvious motivations to not tell the truth or to misrepresent the truth. So
absolutely not. I agree.
Small comment about Azov, guys, before we move forward. Sorry. So when we talk about Azov, like small one, so it deserves like a separate episode, like Prigozhin, because it's literally a military force inside of a military force. Inside with its own like agenda, with different agenda.
Yes.
Just like state inside of a state, there's like autonomy.
I'm a little less familiar with the structure. Would it be a fair comparison as to what the Wagner group was to the Russian military? Or not quite?
No, Wagner was private military campaign.
But weren't they absorbed by after Prigozhin was killed, they kind of took over? Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I thought that was
like...
There is no
it just, Azov has like some sort of independence inside of Ukraine, the entire group of military groups in Ukraine. And the second type, like when Russians said that Ukrainians are like Nazi nationalists, there's one small comment. Like from what I observed, there are two types of nationalists people who like talking about, and they mix them like very often. One type will say like, okay, we are native to these lands, we want to live here our own way. The second one say like, we are native to this lands, like get out, no one else is welcomed. So the second time is not Ukrainian type.
I see.
So because it's the same word.
Sure.
It's two different terms.
Yes. So, and I have met people from Azov, and I have talked to people from Azov, and people from Azov cover a wide range of all sorts of stuff. The Azov people that I met it was a 16-year-old kid in 2014 that he went to the first group that would let him hold a gun and fight for his country. Had nothing to do with the ideology of Nazis or any of that shit. It was only like back in the day, because the Ukrainian military was not well formed in 2014. It was basically non-existent.
True.
But there were people in the East that went to fight for their country with hunting rifles or nothing in their hands. And that's what this kid has done since then. So it's evolved from a volunteer movement, volunteer military militia type movement. And now it is a semi-autonomous substructure that is adjacent to but operates alongside the Ukrainian armed forces.
Okay. That makes sense.
Much more sophisticated now in terms of what it can and cannot do. But again, that's a whole episode. We should do it on its own. Azov is not a Boolean that means someone's a Nazi. It's just not how it is. It's not correct. It's not half of the Azov people are Nazis. Not a quarter of the people are Nazis. It is just a volunteer thing that grew in size until the point that the Ukrainian government sought to annex it. Because the Ukrainian whole thing, there are volunteer battalions that fight for Ukraine. There are volunteer battalions of Chechens, of Belarusians, of Russians that fight for Ukraine. There are what are called separate battalions that fight for Ukraine that do not directly wrap up under the armed forces of Ukraine, but they also work with the armed forces of Ukraine. So they get materials and logistics and do stuff in a different way. So it's not like one single homogenous mass of L battalions and brigades that are all under the armed forces of Ukraine, the UAF. Right?
Okay.
There's the National Guard, there's the Border Service, which are the Snake Island people, right?
Right, yes.
There's the interior people, there's the police forces, there's the International Legion, and all the whole thing. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And you know what it looks like from the like high level? It looks like Cossack Republic of like that exists in Ukraine for centuries.
Oh,
It's very similar on the top level, on the high level.
okay.
If you look at that, like, okay, it's democratic, it's chaotic, it's not, it's like well structured as a unit.
Yeah.
And it only communicates and like still communicates, but don't obey to a single person.
Yeah.
So they ally as a like in like different situations or different battles, for that matter.
Well, anyway, that does kind of bring us to our conclusion here. You know, Zelensky recognized as Time Person of the Year in 2022. It's a big deal, and still getting, you know, a lot of acclaim, and rightfully so. And he's kind of navigating, you know, the second Trump administration, which is certainly a more difficult thing to do than under Biden, right? You know, again, taking a lot of criticism from Trump and Vance themselves. You know, I mean, what can you do? I think he's doing the best he can. He's making the effort. He's coming to the White House. They, in my opinion, were not given Tomahawk missiles for the wrong reason. I think that absolutely should have happened. Apparently, Putin intervened and got what he wanted. Whether they get Tomahawk missiles or not, I guess I should look at what the latest kind of package is in terms of support. It usually needs some level of bipartisan support in Congress with the power of the purse beyond a certain dollar amount. So I don't know kind of what the up and coming, you know, aid package, hardware package is for Ukraine right now. Does anyone happen to know that, if that's being discussed, like the next?
We have structurally, due to the, so where we used to send billions in old military stuff such that the DoD could redirect that money internally to American companies that would manufacture more with American jobs for Americans so that we restock our own stuff. We have shifted away from that paradigm because it's not it wasn't palatable for MAGA. What largely happens now is if we do give tranches, any kind of, not tranche, but if we give any kind of assistance, it's much less in scale. So we're talking millions, tens of millions, in worst case scenario, like a best case scenario, hundreds of millions. But again, nothing compared to what we're talking about for Israel, nothing compared to what we're talking about for any of this other shit. Nothing compared to the costs of what it takes to deploy our military to Venezuela. Those costs are insane. They are absolutely, they're making, you know, like we had that whole episode about how much everything costs in the DoD. The DoD in the States exists as a separate entity that just is exponentially more expensive than anything else in the history of mankind. What is happening now is that America has set up certain chains of support for like the M777s that we provided Ukraine, for example, such that the Europeans who offered cash to the Ukrainians as part of the aid then buy American-made tech for Ukraine with European money.
Okay. That's a pivotal difference.
It is a pivotal difference. It is a stupid difference. It is a cash cow that we're ignoring because of whatever Russian masters exist in our government and or dictate things in the DoD. But, you know, I think it's weird that our Secretary of Defense has a Russian phone number and a Russian email and Russian contacts in his phone list. I think that's weird, personally. I think it's weird that Trump can 180 on Tomahawks after having one phone call with Putin. I think that's weird.
And that would have been a game changer. Like, those are way better. Well, to some extent, I suppose, depending on the quantity they receive.
I think militarily, we're not in a place where anything is going to be supplied in the quantity or with the efficacy required for anything to be a game changer.
That's true, I guess.
A game changer would be if America trained, 500 F-18 pilots and deployed them all to Ukraine tomorrow. That would be a game changer.
Oh, yeah.
That's not going to happen. A few missiles here and there is not.
It's not. Yeah.
throttle the Russian. Well, I mean, here's the thing too: is that despite the fact that Zelensky, right before the war started, made a direct appeal to Russians to stand up against the war, he made this appeal in Russian. All people, if you really think we're brother nations, you guys need to stand up and do something.
Yeah, that's right.
Despite that, we see an extreme political appetite for war among the Russians. So their will has to be broken in different, more creative ways.
I agree.
If it ever can be broken. But
Well,
it will be.
Well, will their will for the appetite for the war be broken, or will somebody else at the very top become?
No, I think the will for the war. So we understand that probably the competition for the Kremlin office will be insane when it happens.
This is what I mean.
Among the inner but my point is that Russians will cool down when there will be not much to eat. They're too comfortable yet.
Well,
yeah, they still have the life that is too comfortable for them. They can travel. They have access to technologies. Generally speaking, when we say about Russians and everything, so we mean the crazy people that are in favor of war and aggression. We understand they also have some native people that are under pressure and in minority, and they have really little chance to have their own state.
That's a good point.
So maybe at someday they will be lucky enough when they see the window of opportunities for them. And I'm sure everyone worldwide will support them because it's easier and probably safer to deal with 100 small, weak governments than with the giant one and the huge nuclear arsenal that is completely unpredictable.
When it does splinter, I agree with you. It will happen very quickly. It will happen very quickly.
Yeah, true.
But I think it's going to happen for reasons of political backstabbing than the people just deciding to rise up and rebel, because that's off the table.
People will not decide.
They're not going to do that.
They're just impossible.
Yeah, they're not capable of doing that anymore. They have that civil society boat sailed a long time ago.
Well, but if they ever had it.
Yeah, assuming they were unemployed to begin with, sure.
You see with all Ukrainian protests, we have traditions of protests.
Yes.
Of when the street speaks. This is something that all democracies have.
Yes.
So we don't see it. We don't see it a lot in Russia.
Do we say it ever? I don't even think we see it.
I don't know, because when you say ever, then we need to consider the time when different territories belong, they did belong to Russia. You see, even Warsaw, for example. So that's quite irrelevant.
Yeah, that would be another good topic for a longer podcast. But
yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for watching. That does bring us to the end of this episode, covering the biography and leadership of Zelensky. And
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye, YouTube. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.